So our first panel discussion will be on crafting seamless customer experiences across channels and touchpoints with data. May sound like a long title, but it focuses on a problem statement that many companies still face when they're trying to build a golden record or drive master data management for better customer engagement. In this discussion, we are lucky to have Joseph Sullivan, a representative from our sponsor. He is the Director, 360 Business Engagement Segment, APAC and Japan at Informatica. He's best placed to tell us how we can achieve 360-degree views of the customers. We'll also be joined by Dr. Yu Chung Chiu. Dr. Yu is the head of data science and customer value management at U-Mobile. Abhishek Rathi from Prudential International Insurance was supposed to join us, but he had to opt out because of last-minute health issues. He sends his apologies. So thank you guys for joining us, and maybe we can just start with the first easy question to you, Dr. Yu. First, companies have been talking about first-party data and master data management for some time. The benefits are clear, everybody understands them. But what are the new challenges that companies are facing?
I think today everyone trying to become a data-driven company, all right. But I think the first challenge they are facing is either they are too rushing into it without a proper strategy, or they either take the other way, trying to do it step by step. Then the pace of catching up with this new technology is too slow. So I see it in this way. So you need to find the right person in-house, reach out to the right partner, the expert out there, all right, to really discuss about the overall business goal you want to achieve, come up with a proper strategy, and most importantly, all right, customize a implementation plan according to your business need and pace. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. You came up with 3 interesting points. First, you mentioned getting the right person to actually interact with the solution provider. I mean, we have been talking about this for 3 to 4, 5 years. How difficult is it to get someone internally to actually talk with the solution provider? What's the conversation that is not happening from your perspective?
Yeah, okay, I can only comment and sharing based on my experience. All right, I know all these big data, data analytics, machine learning, AI has become popular in recent years, and it even started maybe 10 years ago. But to a lot of company, especially those business, traditionally business-oriented industry like banking, financials, right? Not so technically. A lot of them either start with, they think this is still part of traditional IT. Then they are making the first mistake, because traditional IT is very much on operation.
Okay.
You realize today when we talk about data, we want to become a data-driven company, is actually about more on business and strategy. All right, so that is first thing I see. All right. Second is really when we look around, all right, so say for example, we talk about data-driven, then what is the keyword popping up in your mind? You think about data analytics, you think about big data, AI, machine learning, but other than that, what else? All right, so that's why a lot of people actually is really hear the buzzword, know the keyword, but down the line, what is the proper strategy, process, roadmap, framework? They have no idea. I think I even have a interesting experience, a real experience, when I talk to someone, has been promoted to become a head of data. All right, so we're discussing about a PII data, personal information data. After hashing, is it still a PII? Someone will say yes, someone will say no. You see, a head of data should be very, very clear what is PII, what is hashing, and if you apply hashing to a PII, does it still a PII or not? But my experience is really I see two camp. One side of people who's supposed to be the expert say no. The other side of the group of people who's supposed to be the PIC taking care of these things, and will tell you a PII is still a PII no matter what you do with it. So it actually sums up how difficult it's really to get the internal people really know what is this. Beside those sexy story, those buzzwords, those hype they heard from the market. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chiu. And Joseph, you've heard one of the biggest challenges is getting internally people to understand some of the semantics that surrounds data analytics, especially data preparation and data management. As a solution provider, how do you actually wade into this fray?
So, going on from what Dr. Chiu said there, I agree that sort of strategy is that key. People are looking to do this. Sometimes it's, well, we need to do something with data. So let's, we're going to put in a new analytics. We're going to spend a lot of money on analytics. And, that'll be great. We've got some sexy dashboards or a new front end CRM, etc. But it's really, looking exactly as Dr. Chiu said around what's that strategy? What are we driving towards? What are the outcomes that we want to drive from this? Because maybe we don't need to do all of that because it doesn't underpin our strategy or it's not needed right now. And I think that's what's often missing. And, we talked about getting the right person and, talking to vendors, but I actually see it the other way because I suppose I come from the vendor. It's getting the right person to talk internally so that they're talking to each other around, well, look, this is a challenge I've got. Let's see whether that aligns with the challenge you've got. And it's amazing how often you'll see, particularly IT teams talk to vendors like me about what they should do, but they're not, scared's not the right term, but they don't go and talk to their own internal teams to ask them, well, what do you need? How are you doing it now, and how can we make that better? So that's definitely a key challenge that I see. Then, yeah, beyond that, I suppose there's all sorts of challenges. You talked about first party data and people using that. I still feel that there's a lot of poor usage of first party data. There's been a lot of marketing teams, etc., that have relied on third-party data. It's sort of been an easy way. You've had the third-party cookies that you could track people from, but so it's been easy to do that. It's been cheap, but now that they're starting to shut down the third-party cookies in lots of the browsers, they're not supporting them. There's going to be a much bigger focus on, well, look, actually, where is our first-party data? Are we using it? Can we trust it? How can we better leverage it to do much more targeted marketing rather than just a lazy third-party cookie? Let's see what people have been up to elsewhere.
Dr. Chiu, do you see, as what Joseph has said, people are refocusing on their first-party data, especially now when it comes to customer engagement?
I see it differently, but before I answer that, I just want to share something, comment something on what Joseph mentioned, especially when you reach out to those IT people and maybe non-IT people in the organization, because I've been working in the business side for so long. Maybe I can share a little bit. Actually, it's not really like who is scaring of who, or it's just that, internally we have been working for so many years. All the process, all the can do, not cannot do. Everyone is already very familiar with it. It's really like, when I first joined the banks, right? So very often, people will share with me like, oh, doctor, this is something new to the bank. We automatically categorize it is really like unknown or high risk, or better don't do. I think that is maybe the I don't want to say it's a culture, but I think it's just some sort of a habit or become instinct when you're working too long in the business. Yeah, that's why I mentioned that it's still good to have someone internally know what and drive this whole thing with the help from the partner, come up with the proper strategy framework that mapping the overall business goal. Yeah. Okay, then come back to your question. All right. So I think, yes, today, like what Joseph mentions, right? So there's a lot of things changing as well. All these cookies has been more restricted, but I think in business, we are still trying to acquire as much data as we can. The primary data, the third-party data, and for your information, like our organization, we just recently invest into another, the NDM platform, right? So because I do think that even on the vendor side, right, so there's always have a challenge from the regulator, the challenge from maybe some specific governments that they try to tighten things up. But on the business side, we always, I think business always come up with more innovative way to work around, or maybe to break through those limitations. So I will say yes. There, one side there is this resistance, but the other side I only see they are forces or new implementation trying to not only resolve the current challenge we're facing, but also maybe there's a better way of make use of data. Yeah, and at least this is in our organization, we are still really going full force on this. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Chu. And you mentioned right up front just now when we started with the first questions in terms of privacy acts. From a business standpoint, and I'm going to throw that to Joseph later on from solution perspective, solution providers perspective. But Dr. Chu, how difficult is it? Because if you really look at the Privacy Act, and we're not just talking about like Singapore in one country, if you broaden your scope, Privacy Acts can be a nightmare. And it's easier to follow the most, what they call conservative approach. But that is assuming that your data is well prepared, well cleaned, and is ready to be looked upon by the CPO. That's not really true. Usually the data is in a mess and there's like different areas. Even your first party data from one division might be very slightly different from another division. So how do you actually manage that so that the organization goes forward and not take 2 steps back?
I think it is actually one of the most challenging tasks. Seriously, if you want to compare this, I would say data analytics is a piece of cake. It's really easy. But in terms of, you come to the master data management, data governance, that is really, really the most difficult task. Okay, and I can share that, all right, at least from all the organizations I have working experience with, there's no perfect solution. There's always a legacy that, all right, either it's too expensive to fix it, all right, or too much effort, because with the investment of money, time, put it in, right, when the project finish, you actually have a new headache already. All right, so I think a lot of organizations will actually just have to find a way to manage it. In business, we will say, as long there's no perfect solution, but as long as we are aware of it and we are actually able to manage it so that the risk has been minimized. All right, then we can live with it. All right, so in our experience, right, very often it's really, in that case, it come back to the topic very, aligned with today teams. It's really, while everyone rushing for the data analytics, do not forget about your data governance and your data management. It's equally important. And by right, it should be something pre-assist before you do the data analytics, because like what we always say, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you start a data analytics without a proper data quality, which actually come from your data governance and data management, then you can actually question the quality of your data analytics.
So Joseph, throwing back to you, and quickly, from your perspective, as when you engage with all the different customers across the region, data governance, has attitudes changed? Because it used to be a cost center, but people now see it as maybe a profit center that they need to get it right.
I agree that mindset's definitely changing, and you're starting to see the level of maturity really increase, not just here in Asia, but right across the world. There are some companies that are been advanced and mature in it for a long time. But I think majority of organizations are waking up that exactly that. It's not just use the stick. This is a regulatory issue. This is actually something that if you understand your data, you understand where it is, can we trust it, how can we use it, can make you a much more agile business. Because exactly as you said, too many people are worried about the regulation. They don't understand them. And so they go to the risk averse, well, let's do nothing, because we don't know what we can do, so we're not going to do anything. Where if you have and it doesn't even have to be sophisticated data governance capability, just a basic understanding of what we had, it empowers people to say, well, actually, I understand that it's not just this opaque mess. I know a bit about it. I can identify some of my challenges, and then I'm empowered to move more quickly when opportunities arise, and I want to leverage that data. And I think those organizations that realize that take the both approaches are the ones that become successful and then become much more agile and data driven, overall.
Thank you, Joseph. And we have looked at the challenges so far, so you'll soon be discussing about strategies and looking forward at the kind of solutions. But before we begin at that next part and dive into that, Joseph has promised us a short presentation to set the stage for the next part of our discussion. So Joseph, it's up to you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I will keep this short, but get that up. Okay, hopefully you can all see my presentation now. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about, we all know the challenges, and we've probably attending this because we've got an idea of the benefits as well. So, let's look at some of the approaches and solutions that we have towards this. And so, critical obviously is we understand that having that full understanding of your customer, if you want to drive better customer experience, seamless interactions across your various channels and touch points, you really need to understand who your customer is. And that's got to go beyond just that traditional demographic information you've probably been capturing for years, whether you're managing it well or not. You need to go beyond that. We talked just there about things like preferences and permissions. Has the customer, and particularly GDPR drove this, CCPA in California then sort of started to bring it into the US, and we're seeing it more and more right across the PDPAs and PIPLs, etc., that are slowly being rolled out across the region with variations on them. But basically, we all realize now that we've got to capture, has the customer given us permission, and how can we use this data? And it's a real enabler as well, because the customers, won't share with you if they don't believe that they can trust you to use it. So we need to capture that type of information. We need to understand what products and services they've got, relationships between customers and across our business. And then more so when we started to want to differentiate around this and go beyond the, what the competition is doing, is linking in some of these interactions and transaction information. What channels do customers prefer? Where do they tend to interact with us? Do they have service needs and issues? And bringing all of this data together, that we have and is often scattered and can be really hard to bring together, but we can then gain all of these insights from that, understanding the behaviors and the sentiments of customers, what's their journey, how have they interacted with us, the products, and how have they grown with our business, where has the friction been that's going to upset them, that's going to cause them to churn and leave. And if we can bring all of this disparate information together, we can gather these insights that can really help us empower the organization at every touch point, both automated and in person still, to provide that seamless experience, because we know what they've done online, in store, previously purchases, previous problems, etc., and we can build that out. And so I think we're probably in relative agreement around, that's a great vision. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how organizations tend to go there. And so having that customer 360, and customer 360 is a pretty overused term in my opinion. There's not too many solution providers out there that aren't telling you, oh, we do a customer 360, but we tend to find that those customer 360s are really relevant to what they do. It's a siloed customer 360, for want of a better term. CRM vendors all tell you they do the customer 360, and they're really good at displaying it and putting that information in front of you, but they don't create it. They don't really gather that information from across your various various ERP and transactions and quote systems and marketing platforms, they tend to display what they've been given. And so they're part of the problem, they're part of the solution, but they're not the whole solution. We also see it in data warehousing and analytic applications. We've got a customer 360, but again, you know, you can't operationalize that. What we need to get is that sort of dedicated capability that allows, you know, the synchronization and governance of this information across all of those customer touch points, back-end business systems. And so those organizations that I see do this best typically have a sort of two-step approach. Often they start with their master data. So that structured information that they do have about their customers and their products and purchases, they need to be able to bring that together, that first party data that we talked about, that, you know, is in ERPs and CRM systems, marketing systems, and create that governed, trusted single view, you know, where you've got duplicates, you've got data quality issues, but you've got a strong governance process around that. And you can then synchronize that across those systems. But then those ones that want to be much more advanced, you know, they want to go into that sort of what the world that we now sort of talk about as being CDP. And that's going to those bigger data sources where we want to create context around, well, you know, someone's made a transaction, but what have they done before, immediately before and after this that might have impacted, you know, whether they'll make that transaction again. You know, have they been on our website? Have they had a positive or a negative interaction that's driven that transaction? That gives us much more context, and that's where that real insight comes from when you want to drive that, you know, fantastic customer experience. So I'm going to dig into these a little bit, both of these topics here, to sort of talk about how they are. So master data management, it's funny, it's often sort of seen as, well, that's such an old way of doing things. But it's still, I think it's still as relevant and probably more relevant. And that's certainly what we see at Informatica. It's been a huge, globally, we've had a massive uptake in master data management because it's so central to driving any transformation within your organization. You need to get trusted view of your data, and not just customer data, to provide that you know, seamless experience, digitize your process, start doing straight through processing, personalize your interactions. So, you know, master data management, for those that aren't all that familiar with it, it's about being able to grab that fragmented information. There's always data quality issues, there's misspellings, there's duplicate records, you know, understand and bring that together to create your golden record, but have it governed, because, you know, the best will in the world, match engines, or the best match engine in the world, you're never going to get exact matching. There's always edge cases of fathers and sons that have the same name and live at the same address with the same phone number, but they have different dates of birth, and these slip through. So master data management makes sure you can handle those. And then you need to be able to make that and synchronize it out across all of your systems, so that, you know, an update made by a self-service portal can be updated to our marketing and sales team, you know, pretty much instantaneously, so that they are aware of the latest information on the customer. And we want to go beyond customers, as I said. You know, what products do we have? Have we got that consistent view of our products? So if someone's in store and then look at it online, they can tell it's the same product, and hence they can go through with that transaction. You know, what warehouses that are located in? Are they close to the customer? Can we get it shipped there? You know, are there international shipping rules that says we can't take that product across the border? All of this information is master data master data, that if we do it properly, we can empower this to be done, you know, straight through. And a great example of someone that's done this really well is Union Bank. They be known to those coming in from the Philippines, but they're a Filipino bank, you know, mid-sized, around about 5 million customers. They have more than that now, but when we first started talking to them, and they, you know, had a change in strategy. They realized that, you know, banking regulations were going to change. The digital banks were going to come in, and they were going to make it, you know, threaten the traditional banks like themselves that are very branch centric. You know, realize that they needed to transform and digitize or die was almost their strategy. I love this quote from their CEO: "Everything starts and ends with the customer. Excellent customer service will always be the key to the company's growth and stability." And they took that as a real ethos. And so a key part of that transformation was creating the single view of their customer across all of their key systems, so that they could empower that digitization, because they knew that in the Philippines, everyone has, or pretty much everywhere in Asia, everyone has a mobile phone. So if you can empower them to bank on their phone, you can grow your customer base hugely, because not everyone has access to a branch. And so they started off with some AML and KYC sort of use cases. That was primary to them. but ultimately it fed into a whole customer experience use case. And so, they've seen increase in revenue, and you can hear them talk about this regularly from their digital banking efforts by 12x, which is a huge uptake. They've been able to go from provisioning loans in 3 minutes versus 4 to 6 weeks. And it's interesting. We often think about the personalization from a marketing point of view. We don't think about fixing compliance as a customer experience, approach, but actually if you can do your AML and your KYC processing straight through or near automatically, you can start going to 3-minute approvals rather than have it sit in someone's pile and take a week to get manually processed. So they're a great example of someone that's been able to master their data across traditional systems, but empower that digital experience. And they won the Ventana Research Award this year for digital leadership globally. And then when we move on from that, we want those organizations that then want to go beyond that. They want to go into that CDP world. They've heard that topic. So, it's important, I think, some organizations try to jump into the CDP too early and see it as a nice, shiny tool, but you need to get your internal data sorted out first and then grow on top of that, where you start to link in that transaction, interaction, social media, IoT, and other data. That's bringing that data in that context that I talked about is where you get to that true intelligence and really differentiate yourself, because you can take that data, you can understand what people have been doing on your website, you can understand, have they been talking to us on chatbots, but also talking to sales representatives, etc. Bring that information together, and there's not always keys. People are always looking for, we need that unique identifier, national ID or an email address. You don't always get that, so that's where AI and ML in particular have allowed us to be able to bring in huge amounts of data. And I'll talk about a customer example in a minute that have done that, that you just couldn't have done using previous techniques. But you can bring that information in, you can start to see, sentiment of what occurred in a timeline. Are you with the telco and you're getting lots of network drops, information that would normally be stuck on the network side of the business? If you can start to link that interaction data in and see those call drops against the customer's profile, you might change the way you interact with them. You might start to send them discounts as opposed to upsells to them, because they're probably likely to be unhappy and potentially going to churn. And so all of this empowered data allows us to do those better recommendations, that segmentation of one, really go down to the nitty-gritty of this customer and make them different to those big broad segments that we did in the past, because you're linking information from transactions, from interactions, from your quotes and your warehouses, all into the customer to really understand how they interact with you. And that's Dell, which is a really great example of this. I think we all know Dell as an organization. They've actually grown through acquisition quite heavily in their traditional Dell business, but also with VMware and EMC. And so they'd already done the sort of mastering piece within those businesses, but they wanted to go beyond that. They wanted to be able to empower their sales, marketing, and customer service teams to really understand everything about a customer. And they were heavy users of Salesforce, but the Salesforce solutions were more departmentalized, only had certain pieces of information. So that's where they worked with us on getting that context information. So they wanted to bring in information on everything from not just who the customer is and what they've purchased, but what orders have they made, what quotes have they taken out in the past but not actually transacted on. Have there been any incidents? Are there delays in their shipping of their products? Service inquiries or issues that they've had. What are their entitlements, so that we know what they own now, so that we can upsell them other things. Have they been on our website? Web chats. What are they doing in all of these non-traditional pieces of data? How do you bring that together to really empower those sales teams to better understand the customers, marketing to become more personalized, and the service teams to answer that question first time, right time? And so Dell are fantastic, and the data that they bring together is phenomenal. I think they've got 50 different systems across all of those different aspects of the business. Last count was about 6 billion records that came down to about 900 million customers across B2B and B2C organizations. So they've just got this enormous treasure trove of information that they're empowering their teams within Salesforce, but also all of their downstream systems to have that real-time updated information, going beyond just the traditional ERP and CRM data. So they're a really great example of a customer that's seen that vision and grown with their solutions. And so this is how I'll finish up, because I know we want to get back to talking about it, but I think it's important, and we've already touched on this a little bit of, if you're going to invest in these front end, last mile type solutions, being better marketing and better CRM, etc., websites, you need to make sure you've built that data foundation underneath it to underpin it, because so many organizations have invested heavily in these solutions, but then sort of undershot the business case because they didn't have the right data to empower and really make those systems be the best that they could. And so we see that, that data governance that we talked about, understanding what data you have, where is it, who has access to it, how does it flow through our organization, how do we gather it, understanding that is really important, the processes and policies of how we can use it. So that's an important step. Data quality, understand, can we trust this data? It's one thing to have date of birth, but if half of them are the first 1900, because that's the default in your key system, well, that's less useful. So we need to understand the quality and measure and monitor that data so that we can improve it over time. Create that single view that I talked about, and then extend that into the bigger data world. And so we see these as all components of that foundation. There's no right and wrong way to do it. It needs to be, as we said earlier, tied to the strategy or the outcome that you're looking for. And maybe that means you start with data governance, or you start with master data management. There's no right and wrong way, as I say. It's having that vision and knowing, what am I trying to drive towards, and how's my best way to get to that. So that's a little bit from Informatica and what we're seeing on customers, and those that are focusing on that seamless single view of their customer to empower customer experience.
Thank you, Joseph. Just a short reminder that please do send in your questions using the Q&A button. If you can't, for some reason, do use the chat. We will try to manage it, but do use the Q&A as much as possible. We would like to hear your questions, and we are already seeing some questions coming through. Remember, we do have Starbucks vouchers to give out for the first 3 questions. Now, coming back to the discussion that we were having, and Joseph, I'd like to start with you in terms of the presentation. You mentioned about MDM, and that's the first step for a lot of organizations, and you would say that's where a lot of customers who are good start with MDM. Now, how do you make an MDM project that is not departmental based? Because a lot of, like say you mentioned Union Bank, usually the compliance will be drawing an MDM project because that's where the budget is, and they do see the problem statement, but not necessarily the people in the sales who actually see that as an issue. So how do you create a project which is departmental, then scale it enterprise-wide? What kind of support does it need? You're on mute. Sorry, Joseph.
Apologies. It's a good question. That departmental sort of master data often is a sort of informal. It's not, regularly it's not an application. Someone's deployed a MDM vendor solution in that. It's something that's grown through a data mart, and they've created a single view that's, drives a certain outcome and sort of organically grown. I think it's when, the organizations start to see it strategically. You get IT departments and architects saying, well, the best practice as architecture has an MDM in the middle of it, but actually those initiatives don't tend to go too far. They don't get the funding ultimately. It's being able to get that, what's our strategy as an organization? Are we trying to digitize? Are we trying to transform the way we do things? And you start to realize, well, let's start talking to those departments that have got their own little masters, but there's deficiencies, there's problems in it. If you can get them talking to each other, that's when the light bulbs go on and they realize, oh, wow, my problem's similar to your problem, and we could all help each other. It's not an easy thing, and it's not always the place where we see organizations start. Often it starts with DQ, and there's lots of organizations that, well, it's a data quality problem, it's not a mastering problem, and you get this sort of sawtooth approach of, we fix the data quality, we do a project, it then drops off because we finish that project and it's done, but it's not a once and done. It's a continuous ongoing strategy of improving over time. So the advice I give to organizations is to really look at your strategy, look at how data can help underpin that, and really try and get multiple people on board, identify problems within the business that you can ultimately take to the C-level and say, look, we've got multiple challenges, it's not just one, and we think we need to fix it strategically. And it's funny, I've seen organizations and large banks in Asia, not Union Bank, but another, that there was a lot of push. We need to do master data, and they were at it for probably 2 years, and eventually they took lots of resistance mid-level. No, we're busy. We've got other things. We want to invest elsewhere. We don't see this as important. Those challenges. And then when they eventually took it to the board, the chairman of the board said, "Why has it taken you so long to bring it to us? We should have done this more than 12 months ago." And it's sort of interesting seeing both sides of it. It is a board level topic, but often the people in the middle are busy doing other things and focusing on other areas. So you've got to really build that, momentum and talk to the right people.
Thanks, Joseph. And Dr. Chiu, I just want to bring you into the discussion. And when we're talking about MDM and scaling it across the organization and the kind of support that we need from an insider's perspective, how do you get the conversations flowing? Because keep in mind, I had an interview with a customer about MDM project, and they used to say that this MDM project has been transferred from one department to another department, and they keep on saying that whoever hits the MDM project, good luck to them, because they will probably get fired within 1 year. So basically, and that's a kind of momentum, the attitude that people have. How do you get people looking at it as a corporate problem? Do you get the board and the CEO to actually look at the problem as an MDM problem right up front?
First of all, I would like to share that when I listen to what Joseph mentioned just now, you may see from the video that I keep nodding my head, right? Because it's very much aligned with my real life experience. And like I say, really, it's not a pushback. It's just that, in the middle levels, people already very comfortable with whatever they know they do, all right? They know what can do, what cannot be done. And when you go to them, it's a very straight yes and no kind of answer, and most of the time is on the negative side. But come back to the question, really, why many MDM projects fail? Because it's either coming from the operation side, coming from one group of people, one department trying to push it out to the rest. The few project I involved and success, I can share that it's always have to really, you have your full C-suite support on it. And you have to align it with the corporate strategy, the business goal. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Again, I agree with Joseph just now, really. I have seen the example, IT trying to do MDM, trying to do data analytics, right? Every year go to the senior management, ask for the budget, continuously turned down by the C-suite because they don't see a piece of the value to the business. It's coming from, improve the efficiency of the operation only. All right. One of the real story of this is really eventually it get turned around. It's because the business actually take a lead, working with a partner, coming up with a proper strategy and a 3-year roadmap presented to the C, okay, as part of the digital transformation for the organization. Then people only understand, all right, how does it related to my business? Even you are not IT, you're a graduate from business economics, right? As long as the presentation, the paper is talking about, improving the business value or solving your business issue, right? People can understand it, and that is a few cases where I see MDM can be properly, all right, design and implement, and really meeting its expectation in business world.
That's interesting. You mentioned strategy right up front during our discussion, and I think it's good that you came up with that, because there are people who are in the audience who are actually asking questions in terms of strategy. And do you need to consider a strategy based on the digital maturity of an enterprise, or do we want to use it as a goal, as a guide, as a guardrail to build as you build other systems. So that was an interesting point. And maybe Dr. Chu, you might want to take on that for a while, then I'll throw it to Joseph.
Sure, I go first. I will say, see guys, there's no golden rules here, right? You have to be flexible. And today we will say, you rather be agile than the traditional way of working. So you have to be flexible, all right? For example, in this case, do we really need a proper evaluation assessment or, about the maturity of our digital before we can do this data analytics, before we can try this automation? I will say, really, it's just a no. Because if we keep thinking sequentially, then you are actually setting a lot of obstacles and roadblocks before you can actually do something. Or you can try another approach, a more agile approach. But again, it needs to frame under a proper strategy. Because if I go to the C and say, boss, we cannot wait, right? If I want to set up data management, it's going to take me at least 1 year, then proper data governance another year, then data catalog another year, then only I can do data analytics. That is like, are you asking the business to wait for 4 years before we can have proper analytics? We have insight to know our customer better, right? So, but then if you present again, like I say, why I keep mentioning about strategy is really is the winning word, to win everybody heart. You must come up with a broad strategy to show to the C. All right. It's not about IT, it's not about technology, it's about the business. We must transform, we must have a proper digital transformation. How does it impact our sales, marketing, finance, operation, IT? All right. And how does it able to meet our business goal? For example, in a bank, we are talking about revenue uplift, the most important business goal. What is all this MDM, data governance, data analytics, do with it? Then secondly, we talk about operation efficiency. Every year, banks spend maybe a few hundred millions just to upkeep the system they're running. All right. What is all this transformation, new technology can actually help us not only improving the efficiency of it, but maybe in some area it will be actually more cost saving as well. So it must come to a proper strategy mapping to the business goal. And then if you're able to explain it clearly to all the business stakeholders, you will get their buy-in. All right. Then we talk about the next step. Okay, now in order to meet this one, how should we do it? If we do it sequentially, like what I explained, it will be too slow. All right. So here we will propose, we can actually either do things parallelly. All right. Business is never about investment. All right. Business is about justification. All right. So yes, you run multiple streams parallelly. In one side, you would think, well, there's a very big investment. But if you can justify it, saying that, all right, either we wait for a few years before we can do this analytic and understand our product, service, customer better, or we start every stream at one time, all right, with a proper strategy, design, and implementation. So one hand, yes, we start collecting data, but we collect it in the right way. We start catalog our data, we catalog it in a union way. We process it, all right, and standardize it so that everyone, like I think even today, in many organizations, sales have their analytic people, marketing have their analytic people, finance have their analytic people, everyone taking the data and do their own massaging. In the end, all right, so everyone have their own data. So I think one of it is really why that master data management or data governance is important. Is actually ensure we have a standardized, not a sales, not marketing, but a union enterprise level, organization level data definition, like a dictionary. All right. So that is from practice, from experience. That's what I feel is working, and usually we actually follow this kind of implementation strategy for it. So in short, I will say you don't actually need to wait until something is ready, but you must have a proper strategy to govern all this implementation, even you want to do things in parallel. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Chu. Joseph, the question was about developing a strategy. How much, especially developing a strategy with a conversation between somebody inside an organization and a solution provider like yourself, how much is that conversation important? And does digital maturity of an enterprise matter, or can you still come up with a proper strategy based on the maturity levels?
I think a strategy, so in answer to the first part of the question, the strategies, certainly for something like MDM, which is a strategic initiative, you don't do it on a whim. It needs to be something that has multiple buy-in. The strategy is absolutely critical to that. The maturity is definitely a factor. It's not a defining factor. It's just really where you're starting. You need to understand, well, what can we do at the moment? Because some organizations, Dr. Chu said, they've done clearly some good work in the data governance space. They've built a data dictionary. They've got an understanding of their data. Other organizations, and in an ideal world, everyone would have that. They would do the governance, they would understand the data, the quality, and then they move on. But exactly as Dr. Chu said, you can't spend 12 months doing that. And I see a lot of organizations that they bring in practitioners from mature organizations to an immature organization, and they get frustrated because it's so hard. People don't understand the value of data governance, and they try and implement a data governance strategy, and it bogs down. And at the end of the year, they've got nothing to show. And people are like, well, we tried data governance and it failed. And so really that's the strategy of really look at the outcomes. What are we trying to achieve, and how do we sort of do that iteration of, let's try and we want to build a vision and a roadmap to get to that vision, but that could be years away. Let's start with the here and now. What are the quick wins we can do? Let's not fall into that, paralysis by analysis of trying to understand everything across it. We've got some short-term pain. Let's identify that and show value. And whether that's data governance with data quality dashboards, or whether it's mastering because you've created a single view for a single use case. And that's ultimately the great thing about Union Bank. They moved very, very quickly because they realized, hey, we need to do this. Let's identify, we helped them run workshops with representatives from different parts of the business, came up with use cases. It was clear there was a standout use case that had to be done. They actually deployed in 3 months, which is very, very quickly for an MDM implementation, but they were very focused. And interestingly, we could solve all the other use cases as an offshoot of that. We didn't have to do anything else. So it's identifying the maturity, have the vision where you're going, but start, get that first use case and roadmap that we'll do this, and then we'll grow it like this. And this is the vision. That may change, but once you've delivered something, the rest of the business sees it and they're like, wow, I could use this, not interested to start with. I don't care. See it. And, that's when you start to get others on board, and it grows sort of organically across the organization. So there's a bit of a hazy answer to your question, but that's what we see.
It's a good point, because quite a number of the audience, they're coming from conglomerates. So we are actually talking about different businesses having different maturity levels. So I think it's pertinent. You mentioned quick wins, and we have an audience member asking, what are these quick wins and where should we focus on? So Joseph, maybe you can start on that.
Often the quick wins come from initiatives that are already in play. I found. So it's, you've got the vision. Yes, we want to become customer centric, however it may be, we want to do it, but actually building an MDM or a single view of your customer and saying you build it and they'll come doesn't work. We're already replacing we're an insurance company. We're putting in a new EPOS system for our agents and brokers. Okay, well, where are we going to get the data from? They've got a policy centric view. We want to power that with a customer centric view. Or maybe we're putting in a new CRM for our call center agents. And actually we've got, different parts of business, we can't see it. So trying to tie that quick win, I think, to an existing initiative. Regulatory ones from my perspective are the best because they're the ones you have to do here and now. But actually, there's often a lot of projects that are already funded, you're already doing, but we haven't really thought about, well, how are we going to get the data? And yes, maybe the business case doesn't stand up entirely to fund that, the first piece. But if you think you're going to do it anyway, why spend X amount of money migrating and doing a sort of quick and dirty to feed the data into that? Why not do it strategically? And then you've built the foundation. So I see, look for those things a business are doing now, pain points they have to fix, or they've already funded, and tie it to that.
Thank you, Joseph. Before I move to Dr. Chu, just want to remind everyone, please do send in the questions. And if you don't answer them live, we will still answer them offline. And remember, first 3 questions we have Starbucks coupons, and I think 2 of them have gone. Coming to Dr. Chu, quick wins. Where do you start the projects to get those quick wins? And there are actually 2 opposing thoughts. Do you start a project that is simple to do, but may not actually impact much in terms of ROI? Or do you take a slightly more complex project, but it might have a better impact if it goes well?
I think we actually always start with assessment and evaluation. All right, a very simple assessment metric we use is always imagine you have this X and Y. Right, your Y is the value. Right, bottom is 0 value, top is higher value. So your X is really complexity. All right, starting on the 0 point is something easy. All right, here is difficult. So you divide them into four corners. Then you will have something that high value but high complexity, low value, low complexity. All right. So first, talk to the business, identify what are the possible use case. All right, business might not understand IT or whatever. They just want to tell you that, okay, for example, in our business, right, one of the nature of it is every day you got a lot of customer churn from you. If you think this churn is a big issue to the business, you want to do something with it. So then you identify, all right, the business will tell you, I want to retain my customer. Every day I have X% of customer churn from us. All right, and we all know it's very expensive to acquire new customer. So we want to solve this one. So you put this one, customer retention as one of the use case. All right, so business will tell you, if I'm able to reduce the churn by 10%, how much money I'm saving. All right, so then you're able to put it to your Y axis already. What is the value possibly this use case can bring it to you? All right, then on our side, the analytic part or the IT part will say, do we have the data to do this churn prediction model? Do we have the technology to develop a churn prediction model? And also, do we actually have the people? All right, because in a lot of organizations, analytic people know Excel or maybe a traditional Oracle database, but they may not know ML and AI. So we do a very simple evaluation like that. So identify as many use cases as possible. Then you start, putting them into the right corner. From there, obviously, after you've done this, you will know that the quick win is something with higher value but lesser complexity. Because high complexity, you might actually need to go get a budget approval, then find initiate a IFP, invite vendor, do a 3-month evaluation. Eventually, vendor come in, take another 6 months for implementation. Again, you can't wait that long much. So quick win is really look at all the possible things, find something you can start quickly, not with highest value, but acceptable value, then leverage on it. Even when we start, most of the time we start doing things manually because we may not have an automation system yet. All right, but we just want to get it up, show it to business. This is the possible value. Like Joseph mentioned, if you're able to show result in a short period, because if people waiting too long, they may think, this is a fake news or this is, something fantasy. They never see it, they won't believe in it. So you have to show something quickly. Then in, let's say, usually an analytic use case run very, very much shorter compared to a traditional SDLC. SDLC can be 1 year or more project. Analytic use cases is really like 1 to 3 months, you have to show something up. Yeah, so from there, if you are able to show positive result, people buy in, then you can work with them to one hand, continue with more quick win use cases. The other one is really like then work together, put in a proper strategy paper, get the senior management buy in and approve for proper budget. Then you can properly start your digital transformation, acquiring a proper MDM solution, acquiring a proper data catalog solution, even acquire a proper data analytics solution. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. I think that's quite excellent in terms of the way you put it across. And Joseph, I just wanted to end with you because we have around 2 minutes. And that is a question, I guess, which I mentioned earlier in terms of measuring ROI. MDM projects, especially data projects, how do you measure ROI? Because it takes a long while before you can actually see the ROI turning positive.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that, you know, I'll admit, having been in this space for nearly on 15 years, I've spent most of my career in it, you know, across Europe mostly and now in Asia, that we, both as vendors and customers, haven't done well because it's a little bit hazier. You know, we do see some, you know, I saw some great presentations, I think, from JP Morgan, and they could attribute clearly, you know, 50 million increased productivity from their advisors around the way they did it. Often it's not as clear cut as that, because it sort of raises all boats. You know, it's one of those things of improve the data that's being used in the organization. It doesn't just, you know, it's a little bit like you said, the quick wins. It's not binary, as in it only improves that solution. It actually, everyone benefits from having, you get better reporting and better analytics. You get, you know, better engagement, CRM, better targeted marketing. So the ROI is harder to gauge, and most organizations don't actually sit down and look at, well, what were we doing previously? How long was call handling? Now, how is it quicker? It's something that I think needs to be improved. And so the benefits, I think, have got to be looked at holistically across the organization, because everyone benefits from it.
Thank you, Joseph. And we have come to the end of our panel discussion, and thanks. I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Chu for his great insights, as well as Joseph Sullivan for his points of view. It's quite well received by the audience.